Hey, what's up everyone? Today we're taking a look at a really unique piece of early Star Wars ephemera related to the expanded universe. This is a fanzine. This is Rocket's Blast Comicollector. This is something I showed off on a previous video on a different channel several years ago. I thought it was time to finally talk about it here. A great cover with original art connected to this original art on the back. This fanzine is something that came out around, I think its cover date October 77, so a little bit after obviously the first film, almost a year after the sort of like the pre-film novelization that came out in November 76. This was a notable comic fanzine back before there obviously was an internet, back before there was a real sort of like robust official comic book print trade industry. Before there was really even anything like a comic book direct market. There certainly weren't, comic book stores in my town. This is back when you primarily bought comic books at the pharmacy or the grocery store or 7-Eleven. But this is something that by this point had already existed for a decade or so, if not longer, that was all about bringing you all the latest news about all the most important happenings in the comics world. This is a special issue primarily dedicated to Star Wars. Again, beautiful cover art. There's several variants of this. I think the major difference is like basically with like the little price stamp up there. But a cool thing to collect. I did some digging and I think I found that it's only estimated that about 2,000 of these even were produced. I think they can still be found relatively easily, but it's a cool thing to track down if you're an absolute nutty completist for some of the interesting features inside, including some of this, more original art, but also some reviews of some of the early Star Wars EU offerings, like the novelization, and by this point, I think the first half dozen Marvel Comics run, but also some original attempts at some comic adaptations of scenes from A New Hope. So again, right from the start, we're going to make clear that this is an issue about Star Wars. From the adventure of Luke Skywalker. James Van Hise is the editor of this magazine. I believe the creator too. Just giving some rundown for anyone not familiar about what this thing is all about, what the Star Wars thing is all about. But here we have really interesting deconstruction of, as I say, what at that point was probably about the first half dozen or so Marvel comics, Star Wars Marvel style, where it went wrong. It's a pretty interesting, at times brutal sort of deconstruction of the Marvel Comics run. And at this point, it's basically still just the Marvel Comics run. At this point, it's still basically just an adaptation of A New Hope. So there's some thoughts here about the writing. There's some good bits of it, right? Other things that maybe need improvement. The artwork, again, sort of a mixed bag. There's some things about it that are good. I think he says by the end, we're starting to get some good things in some of the later issues. Some things were superb, some things were tight and smooth, other things weren't. But interestingly, he says, I was so frustrated how badly this was done. One particular scene, I asked Carrie Gamble to redraw the scene to show how interesting it should have been, and we'll actually get that take in the next couple of pages. I'll show that in just a second. But an interesting deconstruction too of the covers. And in some cases, he says, where was Star Wars Corporation when some of these absurdities were concocted? Basically sort of calling out sort of a familiar problem in the comics trade of covers that don't actually really seem to represent anything inside the book itself, right? So something like false advertising. Now this is what the editor asked Carrie to produce. It's basically something that the editor thought should have been in the Marvel Comics when representing the cantina scene. So you can I'll kind of slow this down here. You guys can you can read this if you want. Okay, the most interesting thing comes at the end. Right, so far, fairly beat for beat, right? We got Obi-Wan trying to calm people down, but in the instant when the bulky monster's attention was off him, the old man's hand had moved to his object slung at his side. Now, we're obviously familiar with old Ben taking his hand off, but in this adaptation, woof, cuts that dude in half. That's pretty awesome, okay? We get a reproduction of a 1976 interview here with Mark Hamill, with some of his early appearances at the conventions to promote the film. We get a lot of parody artwork here, R2-D2 and Toto too. We get sort of a Wizard of Oz Star Wars mashup, which is of interest to Oz fans. Information here about Vader, the face behind the mask. So, and some more original art. I mean, really, really neat. I mean, this is a fanzine. I've got a number of issues of Rockets, you know, related to all sorts of different sort of, you know, comics happenings back in the late 70s, early 80s. I think it ended around 83. They're all great. They're all amazing time capsules of the comics industry at the time. Look at this. I mean, this is just a stunning work of original art. Absolutely love this, right? One with the Force forever. Breakdown of the music. I mean, the thoughtfulness in here just is limitless. Here's sort of a parody comic, Star Woes, right? I won't get into depth about this. This is obviously just parody, right? There's nothing sort of directly EU about this, right? But I mean, an intense amount of original comic artwork, an intense amount of original criticism, deconstruction, Darth Vader's revenge, or what really happened after the closing credits, right? I've got a bad feeling about this, right? So, you know, sort of a what if. Well, what really would have happened, right? Well, Vader would have come right after that ceremony. Information here about the Star Wars cosmos, right? Just more sort of deconstruction, more original art. I mean, this stuff's it's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. An amazing resource for October 77 to boot, right? And this might be one of the coolest resources for collectors, both now and then. This was at the time, October 77, a complete bibliography of everything you could go out and find that had something Star Wars in it. So a lot of fan magazines, right? A lot of trade magazines, American Cinematographer, right? It even details what are the features inside, you know, behind the scenes of Star Wars, miniature mechanical special, so on and so forth. American Film, Children of the Night with a one-page Star Wars preview, Cinefantastiques, Circus, Compass, Cosmos, even crack magazines, right? Even, you know, comic mags, parody mags, right? Famous Monsters, right? Those are some really iconic covers in some cases. Fans of Central Jersey, right, from June 1977, featuring Star Wars: A Phenomenon. Amazing resource here. Obviously, the Marvel Special Editions, Media Scene, Modern Screen, even National Enquirer, hilarious, about the feature Star Wars Star, Hurt and Crash. I mean, this is just intense. This is really important for EU fans. Pizzazz, Meet the Star Wars Superstars, including 3 pages of Star Wars comic strips. So I've done a video a number of years back about Pizzazz and how important those are in the original works of EU that are there, that are later collected throughout different Dark Horse trades and things like that. But this is where Star Wars comics were starting to pop up. Lots of magazines like this. Reader's Digest, Rolling Stone. I mean, the list goes on and on. An amazing resource, right? What else do we have here? Science fiction, horror, and fantasy. Sight and Sound. All of those early Star logs, which are super important. Tiger Beat, Time. Obviously the Star Wars adaptation itself from Marvel, Us Magazine, Variety, and Western New York Popular Culture Review. And by the way, this list is by no means complete. It's going to keep growing, right? You know, so, and I can't even imagine how long that list would be today. Just some more images here. I mean, just amazing stuff, absolutely amazing stuff. And then we turn to the other half of the magazine, which is about the rest of the comics trade at the time. This is a monster of a thing. It must be about 80 pages or so. In the back, you get, you know, again, more of that great artwork of the Death Star blowing up some planet. Oh, there was something here too I wanted to highlight. This is really neat. This is in the classifieds. Is it here? Let's see. Well, somewhere here, I forget. It's been a while since I looked at this, but there was someone looking for early Star Wars collectibles. So someone after my heart. Who knows? Might have been me. I don't even remember, right? But you know what? I wish I could find it. Well, it doesn't matter. But it was interesting. It was someone at this early date, October 77, basically saying, like, I will buy your collectibles. Not the commercial stuff, not the toys, not, you know, but the types of things that I highlight on this channel, the promos, the collectibles, the press kits, things like that. It's really neat. Already at that age, already at that point, just a few months after the film, just a year after the novelization, Star Wars is already the thing that's sort of, you know, turning fans into obsessive fans, right? And I love it. So anyway, Rocket's Blast Comicollector, a really important comic fanzine. for Star Wars and franchises beyond in the 70s and very early 80s. The issue from October 77 dedicated to Star Wars. As I say, there's a few variants of this issue out there. I think on the whole, at least some version of them is still relatively easy to find. There's lots of information about this online with more in-depth photos if you're interested in taking a look. Just Google around. But an important piece of early Star Wars EU, if only for the sort of the unique original takes on what at least the editor thought the Marvel adaptation should look like, right? With Obi-Wan going to absolute town on one of those guys, splitting them right in half. That would have been amazing to see in the film. Anyway, guys, more of this crazy, obscure stuff in future videos. See you next time.